Hi, what I wanted to do with this very brief lecture is kind of make a bridge from where we've come and where we're going. So this one will be very, very, very short. We have come from week one through a variety of questions that deal with metaphysics. And we're going to continue doing metaphysics, but it's going to get more specific. We began by looking at philosophy as something that starts with wonder. We wonder why the world exists, why things are the way they are. This is something that occupied the pre-Socratic philosophers. And today that search is taken up by physicists such as string theorists. We looked at the meaning of human existence and the question of existence in the work of Martin Heidegger and Albert Camus. What we're doing now is we're going to be kind of fine-tuning our search into two areas. One deals with the philosophy of mind, and the second is free will. So philosophy of mind is that subfield of philosophy. For many philosophers, it is the ultimate metaphysical question. It examines, for example, the relationship between the mind and the body. If the mind is one thing and the body is something else, how do the two connect? To paraphrase John Searle, the contemporary American philosopher, how can a world of unconscious physical particles like atoms and molecules at some level of organization come together and form not just living things, but consciousness, with the things that go along with that, ideas, intentionality, subjectivity. So that is a classic question for philosophers, and it's one that we will look at. We'll begin by looking at René Descartes, the famous 17th century French philosopher who uttered a very famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am." And you'll have a chance now to understand what he was trying to get at with that phrase. But Descartes, as brilliant as he was, leaves us with a big problem, and that is we call dualism. With Descartes, there was no problem of having two kinds of stuff in the world. Physical stuff that has extension. This pencil has length and depth and height. This book has three dimensions. That's what we mean by extension in the physical world. But the mind does not have extension. Descartes used the phrase mind, and sometimes he used the word soul. For him, they were interchangeable. This was a separate kind of substance. Many philosophers are dualists, meaning that there are two kinds of stuff in the world for them. There's consciousness stuff, or you even want to call it soul stuff, and then there's physical stuff. Well, that's not necessarily a problem until you think about this for a moment and you realize you need to connect the two. How can my mind, which is a different kind of stuff that's physical, exert a change in the physical world? How can my mind make up a decision to raise my arm or to take this bottle of water and move it from one side of my desk to another? That's a very small impact here in the physical world, but it's something that's mental that affects something physical. So we'll take a look at this one here. We'll begin by looking at Descartes, and then we'll be looking at modern solutions to the mind-body problem. In particular, behaviorism, very, very briefly. Then we'll look at brain identity theory, sometimes just called identity theory. Then we'll look at functionalism, along with a subfield called computationalism, and we'll ask the question, can computers think? And then we'll look at John Searle's solution, what's called biological naturalism, and finally we'll look at physicalism, and that's where Patricia Churchland comes into play. So you should be reading the Patricia Churchland sections right now. Churchland and her husband, very famous philosophers, both working in the philosophy of mind, and both being physicalists in terms of their interpretation, their solution to the mind-body problem. And then after that, we will talk a little bit about free will, which is also a large metaphysical question. How can minds, whether they're based in physical things or if they're mental, how can we talk about our volition? Or are we shaped by forces that are outside of our control? I'm going to be bringing some recent research from neuroscience, so this should be very, very interesting. It's a very important field, actually, and you'll be surprised, I think, to hear what different philosophers say. So that's where we're going. We'll take a look at physicalism as a possible solution. And while I'm talking about physicalism, I just want to add one thing. The early PowerPoint on the study of reality concluded by talking about dualism and monism. Monism is the idea the world is one thing. So some people say the world is mind. That's what it is. Mind is first and primary. And other people say, no, 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 it's matter. Matter is primary. So you have materialists and you have idealists. Idealists, by the way, don't argue that we hallucinate reality. They argue instead a very interesting position that the mind is not a passive recipient. The mind shapes reality. How do we know anything about the physical world except through our minds? Our mind is what unifies all this experience. So we'll take a closer look at idealism. But materialists, nowadays called physicalists more often, tend to have a large thing to say about free will and also about philosophy of mind. The reason why we sometimes use the word physicalism rather than materialism is that matter, as we see it here, is not the end of the road. Hopefully from the string theory film you got the sense that within matter there are things that are even smaller, and we can go down to the level of atoms and even down to the level of tiny vibrating strings. So physicalism says that all things that are real are physical, but they don't talk about matter in the way that we do. You'll read some stuff that goes back and forth, talks about matter and physicalism, materialism and physicalism together, so we can use the words interchangeably, but I'll generally refer to that position as physicalism. That's it for now. Stay tuned for Descartes. Thank you.